There we go. How's David Rogers today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Man, you have a great microphone voice. This is good.
Thank you.
All right. Very glad to have you here. We just spent about a half hour just talking about interests and all. We got into pop culture. So while you're enjoying your lime water there, I'm going to do the Corona because apparently people are thinking that the coronavirus comes from Corona. So that's what I'm going to do.
I never drank Corona when I was at A&M. Primarily, we were Miller Lite.
Yeah.
And I've always, anytime I go to a bar that serves craft beers or anything, I don't drink as much as I used to in college and law school. It's always what's closest to Miller Lite.
Yeah,
so,
that's our, in my band, that's kind of our go-to. Everybody has it. And Tim, who's sick, he couldn't be here today. Tim's a brewer and makes all kinds of craft beer, so that's what he'll drink. And our drummer, he'll drink like Coors Light. But I remember that in college. I mean, price point was a thing more so than flavor and availability, I think.
At A&M, I went to A&M in the 80s. We had Pearl that was what you would get at the Chicken in a pitcher, or Lone Star. And pitchers were like 25 cents, 50 cents.
Wow. And it's not that long ago. That's just that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I was down in Mexico. We were way down in Manzanillo, and we took a drive through Colima to the volcano and all these little villages and coffee plantations and stuff. And I had some Corona out of the Colima brewery that's made with water and everything from down there. And this is somewhere else in northern. Totally different experience. It was really good. And my wife took a picture of me hugging the Corona brewery.
Right.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Good experience.
When I was in Mexico, we drank Modelo.
Yeah.
And I liked Negra Modelo and the Especial.
Yeah. I like that. I like Estrella. And there was another one. Maybe it was Modelo. Everywhere we went, every market, every beach, whatever, would be somebody with just a little cooler selling beer. You can just get it anywhere. Just it's the land of the walking around beer, wherever you go.
And I think the only kind of different beers I drank or got into was Blue Moon.
Oh yeah,
with the orange slice, and then for a while I started drinking Black and Tans.
Yeah. We go to Murray's every Wednesday night, and they do a pretty mean Black and Tan. Something about kegged Guinness is just wonderful. And Murray's was the only place for years that carried it.
Right.
So, but yeah, in fact, I was there with Matt Ruff and some other guys, retired DPS pilot. And he had a Black and Tan. They made it so well, he got it down to the last couple inches, and you could still see the split in it. So it's pretty cool. All right, so you're up for 142nd District Judge.
Running for the 142nd, replacing Judge Jody Gillis.
Judge Gillis, yep, he's coming out. And let's see, you're up against Mary Baker. She was here earlier, and Wayne Frost.
Rain Frost, yes,
sir. That's it so far. So I did the internet stalking on you since Tim wasn't going to be here. So Midland born, you're native. Midland High School, 84.
Right.
A&M. BA in history, which was really cool, and Corps of Cadets.
I graduated from Midland High in '84. I played on the Manly tennis team all my years there, but that was back in the days of wood rackets. So up until my senior year, or maybe junior, I had a Jack Kramer autograph, which was a wood racket, and then Prince came out. And they came out with the Prince Pro, which kind of became the go-to racket that everyone had. And I don't remember if it was 110 square inches or
aluminum,
inches.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of alloy.
And then at A&M, I was in the Corps Cadets. I'd wanted to go into the service. So my sophomore year, I got an Army scholarship. And in between my sophomore and junior year, I went to airborne school at Fort Benning.
Cool.
Spent 3 weeks there, got my blood wings. Made 5 jumps. And then between my junior and senior year, I went to Fort Riley for Officers Advanced Camp.
Right.
And I had allergies coming out of Midland, so I had an inhaler. And they said, this was in 86, so they really didn't want people necessarily in the military, but they said, you got asthma, honorable discharge.
One of my friends, his name's Rob Clarkson, came from a long line of Navy men, and that's all he wanted. And they found his inhaler. I think it was at his boot camp. And,
it was a done deal, and the interesting thing was at the same time they were sending me home, a guy, and I think he wanted to be in the field artillery, got sent home because he missed a ping in one of his ear tones when they did the ear test.
Put you in that little monkey box. Yeah. We had a guy in my unit. He had been in the military since Vietnam. He was very young. He was a Marine, and he got out and went in the Coast Guard. That guy had a fruit salad that looked like he ought to be giving a briefing on CNN.
Right.
And his hearing was going. We all knew it. And he showed up for training day. He forgot to take his hearing aids out. And so he had to retire like a year earlier than he absolutely positively had to. But yeah, and they still don't screw around with that. And they're raising lower standards, especially on things like aviation and like in the Coast Guard, some of our slots, just to manage their numbers. So when they don't need as many of this, they raise the standards, and then holy crap, a bunch of them retired, they'll drop it. But man, that inhaler will always take you out of the game.
Yeah, bringing up the Coast Guard, it was interesting when I took a naval history course at A&M that was the worst place to be in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And you didn't think that, and I didn't know that, but they stuck all those guys on the riverine and the rivers.
Yeah, and there was a lot of Coast Guard at D-Day. They drove the landing boats. There's a lot of history of the Coast Guard that I didn't know. And, going back to the surf boat days and the lighthouses and all that, it's amazing. And today, there's so much you can do in the Coast Guard. Anybody tells me they're thinking about going in the military, I'll wave them that way. They took good care of us. I was just a cop. I mean, I did the same thing I did here, except on the water, and actually less of it because, as you go up in jurisdiction, you go down in the number of offenses you're responsible for. So, and then I dealt with international shipping and things like that. So there's so much money involved. Everybody kept everything square.
Right.
But it was a great experience, and I had a very easy time compared to some of my buddies that were on medium endurance cutters up in the Bering Strait and all that. It's a beautiful history though.
I had one friend. I played on the high school tennis team with him. He went to the Coast Guard, Doug Eccleston. And he was a rescue diver, and he ended up rescuing someone and passing away. But
I remember that he's friends with a friend of mine, and I think related to another friend. I remember him. He was a diver. We lost an air crew in my time. They just mechanical failure, and a helicopter went down, and that stuff's horrible. But I almost fell off gangplank one time. I was on it, and they were lowering. It was on a big Chinese freight ship. It was like 900 something feet, just enormous. And as they were lowering it, there was a kink in the cable, so it dropped about 3 feet. And my buddy and I went sliding down it like a Three Stooges sketch. And fortunately, didn't go in the water because we had. I can say this now. Aside from my gun belt and body armor and all the stuff that sinks, we had a 12-pack of beer in my case because I made friends with this Chinese cook, and they had I think it was Tsingtao from China, not the stuff that's brewed somewhere else or however it works, and they let them drink it at lunch, and they were trying to offer us a beer, and I'm like, we can't do that. I mean, like that's a huge deal for us. And he kept trying, and he was kind of offended that I wouldn't take his beer. And then I got their like a 3-0 guy come in and say, "Hey man, these dudes can't drink." And he was sorry for being offended and all like that. So he gave me, and when a case, it was a 12-pack of it, and shoved that right in the old backpack. So that would have been an interesting story if I got fished out of the drink with that in there.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah. I have no idea. Must have picked it up when I was in the water trying to swim, But actually, they said fully decked out with the life vest we had, he'd probably suspend you about 3 foot underwater.
Wow.
So, but it was one of those things we were talking about how government's always kind of behind the mark, and our armament and all of our gear that we were required to carry and tools and all hadn't quite caught up to flotation just yet, from what I understand. Never tested it, but yeah. That was one of those things. And then, so you after Corps Cadets, you worked with the RNC.
I went to work for the George Bush campaign in Washington, and I worked in the press office there.
Okay.
And then I worked for the inaugural committee, and then I worked in the press office at the RNC in the communications division.
Okay. What's that like, being in a press office? Is that an ant bed?
When it was at the campaign, it was very stressful. Because you were just getting, not that I was giving quotes to the press. I mean, I was an intern.
Right.
And so I would answer the initial calls and forward them to where they needed to be. But part of my job was working with the staff members that placed reporters on Air Force 2, because he wasn't president, so it wasn't Air Force 1.
Right.
And then placing members of the press on the plane. So it was always stressful, because there was a pecking order of the traveling press that traveled with the vice president at the time, and then the press on getting them into the plane and who was important, who wasn't. Everyone wanted to be on the plane.
One of my buddies was a radio man on Air Force 1 and 2, and whatever the helo is.
Right.
Took the same guy.
Marine 1 or Marine 2.
How many? Marine 1 and 2. How many? Press would go on like Air Force 2 or Air Force 1?
It was a traveling pool, and I can't remember how many it sat at the time. And then there was a press plane that followed.
I did not know that.
So, and then basically at the inaugural, what I did for that was it was media credentialing for each of the balls. And then in the when I worked at the RNC, I was a member of the press office, or the communications office, press office, and I worked in the video department. And that was back when Lee Atwater was blowing and going.
Right. Man, that had been a time before the internet was a huge thing.
Yeah, there was no internet. I mean, everything was VHS.
Wow. VHS, and they have the 2-inch.
If it was something that you were producing, you put it on beta.
Oh,
I think is the proper technical term. But
before beta died.
Right.
Yeah.
But we were VHS. Everything. Anyone who wanted a video, we sent it out on VHS.
Man, that stuff makes me feel old.
Yeah.
I remember the Laserdisc too. The big, you could only you didn't record to it. You just bought movies on it and played it.
And some of the big deal was when the RNC got a satellite. And I don't know if you can still do it today, but like I remember getting the Twin Peaks final early because they were sending the video feed from point A to point B, and you could download it.
Right. You could pinch it.
Or watch it. If you could figure out what satellite it was going to and from. I remember watching the Twin Peaks final before it aired.
I think all that's encrypted now. There's still guys playing with that in ham radio, but I think there's a few old satellites still running. Like the weather satellite images,
right.
You can pick that up with a dongle on your computer and throw an antenna out.
I'd imagine you can't do it now.
Yeah.
But then nobody was recording anything. You didn't have a way to capture it.
Yeah. That's one hell of an experience. We talked to Brandon Batch, and he was an intern there too, and just a lot of fascinating stories. That has to be that kind of make you look into politics, or at that point in your life.
The problem with being in D.C. is you're in such a bubble, and you start to believe in things you're doing are important when really they're not. Yeah. The people here had no effect on what was going on. What was interesting was the process and how, everything you got, your media guide every morning, what was reported, what wasn't. You learned about spinning, how to spin stories, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Crisis management.
Oof.
Everything was, oh my gosh, this came out. How do we handle it? What's going to be the White House position? What's the RNC position?
Sounds like a lot of big decisions really, really fast.
And everything's kind of made in the bubble.
Gotcha.
There. The biggest crisis I think that happened when I was at the Republican National Committee was Tom Foley was the Speaker of the House, and they put out an ad based on rumors called "Out of Closet Foley," and it was a snarky ad based on some perceptions about him, and they said he's an out of the closet liberal, and Lee Atwater had to end up, I think, apologizing for that, and the communications director, I think he lost his job over that. But that's high-level politics when you've got a newly elected president, and one of the first things that comes out of the Republican National Committee is an ad, and then you have that against the Speaker of the House.
Right.
Now, we didn't have, I think at the time there was CNN, C-SPAN was just getting started, but you had none of the 24-hour.
Right.
So it was a story, but it really wasn't a national story.
Was the looping news back in those days when it was a 30-minute cycle?
It was on one of those.
Yeah. Oh wow. So it made several passes before anybody got a chance to.
Right.
Yeah. That's and now. Compare that to now. If that happened today, how many? It happens all the time, but
I mean, it'd be instantaneous.
Yeah. I was thinking about you earlier. I was watching Steve Leto's Law, the guy up in Michigan. I don't know if you've ever seen his.
I haven't seen any of those.
He's an interesting guy. He's a lawyer. I think he does civil, probate, stuff like that. He's written books about cars. He's been in broadcasting and really good guy. But he was given a rundown on the stories going around about Pelosi tearing up the speech, that it's a federal crime because it's destroying a government document bound for the National Archives or whatever. And this guy broke it down in this most lawyerly fashion on why it's not.
Right.
And threw that in. But that's one of those things. Just somebody said, "Hey, isn't that a violation by tearing up a government record?" And then boom, it's everywhere. I mean, it was turn on the TV, it's there. Log on the computer, it's there. My top 3 stories on my phone. When I'm sitting at the vet's office today waiting for my dog, it's there. That soon, that much, just a little drop.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, amazing. So after you did that, that's when you went to law school.
I went to law school at St. Mary's University in San Antonio. Got out of law school, and in the middle of me being in law school, well, not in the middle, I think it was towards the end. I got out in 93. They killed what was called workers' comp, which lots of lawyers made lots of money on. So when I got out, it was a depressed legal environment. Right. So I came back to Midland. I opened my own firm. I went in and officed. I was first officed by myself, and then I went in with 2 guys, Ian Canacuzine and John Cook were very nice to help me out. And then I got hired by Brockett Lindemood, and I worked for a civil firm for 10 years. Brockett Lindemood in 2006. I went out on my own and partnered with Ray Fivecoat, and from 2006 on, I've been with Ray.
Oh, I can tell you, all the way back to my SO days, I see you a lot. You're a busy dude.
I was a frequented.
Yeah, I mean, you were always there to visit clients in the jail, and I think we had a couple of cases at the sheriff's office where you came to see me, and then at the DA's office all the time. Like you're always there working your arraignment. I just run into you all the time.
Yeah, I was always at the DA's office, always up at the courthouse, at the sheriff's jail a lot, and then at some point I was the cleat lawyer here.
Right.
So I would have to go out on officer-involved shootings.
Right.
And that was rough. I think the roughest one I went out on was when Deputy Naylor was shot, and that was rough.
Yeah.
Because part of the cleat lawyer's job is to go out and make sure, because, I mean, as you know, every officer has to testify potentially before the grand jury and justify the shooting. And going out and talking to those guys, I mean, that was just rough.
Yeah. For those of you not familiar with it, CLEAT is Combined Law Enforcement Agencies of Texas, and it's the closest thing we have to a union that looks out for essentially employee rights and things of that nature. And one of the things they do is they hire local lawyers like David, and we get into shooting or have different labor concerns and things of that nature. And I was in a couple shootings. Brian Carney got called up on those, and it's to the point now where if you're at a local, like a PD or an SO, and you get in a shooting, and they immediately call the Texas Rangers to be the impartial agency to come in and investigate it, they're the ones that call CLEAT. And like I said, I got a call from Brian before I talked to anyone. I talked to CLEAT, and then Brian called, and it's just done, right then and there.
I never had one that I was worried for the officer for. Every shooting was justified.
Yeah, that's I remember the Naylor one very well. I was already not at the sheriff's office, and I was out of town when it happened. Just far enough away, I was with a buddy of mine. He's a firefighter, and we heard it on the radio, and that was tough. And then I started getting texts and all that. So
yeah, it was rough because he was such a well-respected deputy.
Oh yeah, that was a good dude. He rode out with me a lot early in his career when I was a patrolman, and I spent a lot of time hanging out with him. And just a good dude. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's horrible, and we've lost more. It's been a strange time.
Yeah.
So, you've seen a lot of difference in. I mean, can you kind of summarize from when you first started doing criminal to now? It's particular to Midland. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of overworked things. Things that crossed my desk when I was at the DA's office and at the sheriff's office, reports and all. It's just that there's so much going on. Sometimes we don't have the time to pay attention to the stuff we need to.
Since I started, the crime rate has increasingly gone up. I mean, that's with the population.
Mm-hmm.
But, the problem is you have a population that comes in, and if oil's up, you still have crime, but you don't have as much. When oil goes down, you start seeing the property crimes, oil field theft, so you have an increased crime rate, you have increased drug crimes, increased DWIs,
domestic violence,
lots of domestic violence. So, it ebbs and flows with the population, but with I'm going to date myself. I'm 54, but with the younger generation, you just have there's not so much an acceptance of responsibility. And it seems to be more entitlement to what they do, and more, well, this is my right, and it's not. I mean, it's against the law.
Now that you mention that, I was talking to, it was an Edward Jones investment guy. They have a tradition of making the new guys go door to door like they did 95 years ago. And I was talking to this guy, and I was asking him, what's it like? And I wanted to ask you, if you're block walking and all knocking on doors, so people don't answer their doors. And I said, inevitably at the DA's office, when I'd be looking for a witness or serve a subpoena or something like that, I would go knock on a door looking for a 22, 23-year-old man. I'd knock on the door, nobody would answer. And about the time I got around the corner, going back to the office, I'd get a call from his mom.
I had that exact same thing happen. I was out block walking, and a lady young lady had her door open. It was a glass door. I walked up to the door, and I remember it vividly because she was watching Very Cavallari. And in any time you're block walking, you think about, what am I going to say to this person? Right. And so I had my line of, oh, this is embarrassing. I'm so old. I used to watch her on Laguna Beach. But I didn't get to use it because she didn't answer.
Yeah.
And then I was back at my car and saw her just driving around. So sometimes people just don't answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I would have the They would have the wireless doorbells with the camera. I'd have my badge around my neck, and they wouldn't even talk to me then, and leave a card. And later on, they would call and leave a voicemail. It's like just avoiding any as much direct contact as possible. And I've had to tell quite a few moms of adult grown-ass men, I can't talk to you about this.
Right.
I have to talk to him, and all he has to do is call me. And, telling people, if this was something bad, we wouldn't be talking about it on the phone. He'd be in the back of a car. I just need to talk to the guy, but no, it's just not the way we do things anymore. And I'm 49, and if that happened, that's something I would hide from my mom, even as a grown ass man.
Right.
That's just how it looks to me. Hey, that brings up a topic. Sorry, my voice is still shot. I got this in the mail yesterday. Very sharp looking flyer. And we're talking about the things you would do as judge. And it's really impressive that you're there to interpret the law and not legislate from the bench.
Right.
Like that. Deliver tough sentences to violent criminals and uphold the rule of law of the court that honors God and the Constitution. And I want your take, if as much as you can give. I know you're under some strange constraints running as a judge.
Right.
But I follow, and we had a conversation about pop culture, so I follow a couple of things on Reddit that are, you have to be a cop to get into. You actually have to show them your ID and all. And I follow some of those, and there's such a trend right now, not only decriminalizing drugs, but like in New York, automatic bonds, and I'm in the whole thought of drug abuse as a disease. I firmly believe it ought to be treated as a disease, but when it's no longer criminal, doesn't that give us what we have in Seattle and San Francisco right now?
It does, and it's against the law until it's not.
Right.
I mean, and the bottom line is, if they decriminalize or legalize marijuana, then it's not a crime. But as long as it is, you have to enforce the law. But Midland has, the drug court that's designed to specifically deal with that issue. Now, it's not going to deal with people with assaultive type offenses, I don't think. Or if you are a dealer, you can't get into the drug court. And it kind of makes sense. If you've been accused of delivery, you don't get drug court.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, Midland is taking steps when it's a drug offense to give reduced sentences to drug offenders. And Elizabeth Rainey handles that court. We have a mental health court that Judge Leonard handles, and Judge Darr handles the Veterans Court. So if you're a vet and commit a crime, there's a specialty court for you. So, normally the district judges, if you don't fit into one of those three categories, and especially since you brought up drugs, if you don't get the drug court, then you're in front of a district judge for sentencing or punishment issues.
So, okay, you're already in a different zone anyway. Yeah. When you read about that, and people talk about, well, the prisons are just full of people that got arrested for a joint. And I'm like, I don't know how that happens. When you look it up, it'll say, yeah, this guy robbed a bank. He got out on parole, and he got pulled over, and there was a joint in the ashtray, and they violated it. And he went to prison. Like, that joint is not what sent him to prison. It was the bank robbery.
What I kind of tell clients is, you got different categories, because obviously if they're talking to me and it's a felony, their first concern is, am I going to go to prison or am I not?
Right.
And you have to tell them there's a certain category of offenses that's generally going to get you sent to prison if you're convicted, or a plea offer for prison. Or it might not be that category of offense, but you've done so much in your past that it's either an automatic prison sentence or would justify it to a jury. But if you're just a garden variety, first time possession case, normally with a clean record, a jury's not going to sentence you to prison. Yeah. So to answer your question, or Fourth, you've got the people that are on deferred or on probation who have violated, and there's nothing else you can do for them, and they go to prison. And so, I have found you don't have a bunch of first-time people in prison who have done anything but had less than a gram of cocaine. So I don't agree,
And something I disagree with, and we've talked about it before. I was in an intel loop, and that I knew a lot about what was going on in Mexico with the cartels, and how incredibly violent, how off the charts violent all that has become. And especially, well, maybe not so much with marijuana anymore with all the legalization in the States, but I don't think there is a such thing as a non-violent drug. I mean, if it's cocaine that came through Mexico, and there are a lot of people that died over that. It's just I know that's kind of metaphrased and a big scale, but that's just how I see it.
We don't see a lot of or in the federal level cases I've done, and on the state level cases, I haven't seen a lot of cartel related. I've seen it, but it's not in every case.
Not directly,
but with cocaine, and now, back when you were with the sheriff's department and the PD, people are out in the woods cooking up methamphetamine.
Oh yeah.
With battery acid and matchbox strips, and that is gone. We would get cases where it was maybe 60%. Mm-hmm. Now it's coming out of Mexico, and it is 90.
Yep. Yeah, they've gone Heisenberg.
So yeah.
It's really impressive. It's scary when you see how much control of that country that the cartel has, and that's because of, in my opinion, on a professional and I think well-educated opinion, because of our consumption of illegal drugs either made or passed through Mexico. And that is my 2 cents on it. I see everybody wanting to be soft, and then you see the rampant drug abuse there, and and I know we're just now trying to get a handle on the prescription thing that's exclusively ours.
Right.
But of course, then now you get to fentanyl, and I was having a procedure done at MD Anderson, and I was talking to an anesthesiologist. I was an MD over in anesthesia. And they're like lawyers, man. You're never short of conversation with those guys. He was really into his science, and we were just discussing drugs, and I told him that I was a DA investigator, and I'd just done a fentanyl case. And then the guy just proceeded to scare the hell out of me about fentanyl and how the difference between the medical and the street variety and all. And he said, "You mark my words, we're going to start seeing carfentanyl." He said, when you see Marlon Perkins knock down elephants, on the 70s Mutual of Omaha, he says, that was carfentanyl. He said, humans we have kind of a rare tick that when you hit us with opiates, we can stop breathing. And he said, they didn't have to be that careful with elephants and all that stuff that they knocked out. And he said, but that's going to hit the street and it's going to kill people. By the time I got back and I was reading, I think it was Police One, it's a cop, trade publication. Carfentanyl started hitting the States.
And I don't know that I've had a case with carfentanyl, but it's just when you have fentanyl, it's just officer safety is paramount, and in what they have to suit up and gear up.
Yeah, we were worried about meth labs when I was on SWAT, and that's pretty easy. You work your intel, you wear your respirator, your gas mask, use non-sparking tools. Pray you don't have to shoot anybody, nothing flammable. But now these guys, people are getting killed because they've got a hole in their glove or something like that. It's absolutely amazing. But so how did you decide to run for 142? I mean, you have a good practice and a great firm, great partner. I think a lot of Ray. I used to fence with his brother. His brother was a fencer until he got hurt. And I coached him, and so you gonna do the next thing, be a judge?
It's it's the next thing. I looked and talked to people, and I had the requisite qualifications and experience to run for judge. I think at the time I announced, I wasn't aware that Wayne was running. I knew Mary was running, and it's just a difference in experience.
Yeah.
When you hear talk about people wanting a civil lawyer, well, I was a civil lawyer for 10 years, and I've done personal injury cases to jury trials. I did an eminent domain jury trial and custody jury trials, and over 300 bench trials, a lot of which are divorce cases and family law cases, but they're still governed by the rules of evidence, just like a criminal case.
Okay, I'm still in the same boat.
The rules of civil procedure are different than the rules of criminal procedure, but in family law, the rules of civil procedure governed. So I thought, on a whole, I have both the more balanced experience. Mary's an oil and gas lawyer. Wayne does primarily criminal. I can't think ever of having a civil case with Wayne Frost. But I thought I had the most balanced practice and brought the most experience to the bench because I've done both civil trials and criminal trials.
I've been questioned a couple of times by you. Like, you're one of those lawyers here in Midland that when I hear it's you, I'll double check everything. I do, because you're not. I've had a lot of defense lawyers do some really shady and underhanded things and try some stupid stuff. Never seen that out of you guys. You read your report twice and, and check your evidence and all. You guys are good. I'll tell you something I really appreciate about you and Mary and Wayne, because I know all of you. I've known. I think I met Wayne first. He was at the DA's office a long time ago, right?
Wayne was an assistant district attorney when I got into practice in '93, and then I don't remember his genesis, but he was in the drug unit then, and then he went to, I can't remember if he was the revocation lawyer who handled all the probation revocations, and then he ended up in misdemeanor court as a misdemeanor prosecutor, and then out in private practice.
Right. Yeah, I do remember the drug because I started the sheriff's office in '91, and I wound up with one of his cases. He worked a case. But one thing I admire about all of you is there's just not the dirt and the mud that you're seeing in a lot of elections. Everybody's, at least what I'm seeing, nobody has said anything bad other than, I think I'm the better choice because I have this experience or I have this feature. It's been refreshing, and I think we talked about it with, I can't remember, Mary or Rebecca, that one thing about Midland, just jurisprudence in our area, reminds me of the old coyote and sheepdog cartoons, right? Ralph and Sam, that they lived in the same house and they would eat breakfast and go punch in the clock, and then the coyote would try to steal the sheep, and the sheepdog would beat the hell out of him.
I was trying to think if that was on the Bugs Bunny cartoon.
That was It was what's his name? Chuck Jones, Looney Tunes, and all like that.
It was a Looney Tune.
And it was the same coyote as in Coyote and Roadrunner, pretty much. But he actually talked in that one. But I show that I taught, probably still could, courtroom demeanor and testimony at the academy, and I would show those cartoons, and I would tell them this is how it actually is here. And so everybody's been fantastic about it. So there's nothing major to change in 142 from what everybody's I'm hearing.
I think you change a couple of different things. One is there's a backlog of civil cases that need a ruling on. And I think, they may run a docket prior to the new judge being elected to try to get rid of some of those.
Right.
But there's a lot of pending cases that are, a couple of years old that need a resolution. So whoever the new judge is, if those aren't dealt with, has a heavier civil docket than normal to get rid of those. But, primarily what you're dealing with in that court and with any of the courts is a heavy volume of criminal cases.
Yeah. Is it possible, I've seen new judges come in or just long-term sitting judges do it, put together sort of a rocket docket or burst through a bunch of cases going to, deferred or probation pleas and just kind of stacking them up and getting them out of the way, clearing the docket. Is that possible in civil, or is that just a different animal?
I think it's not. The civil lawyers run their own cases generally. I mean, you can put them on a scheduling order, which probably needs to be done, but they're not governed by the Speedy Trial Act. I mean, you don't have the United States Constitution that says you got to handle this case quickly, and you got all these rights that come with the Texas Constitution, the United States Constitution. But when they file a motion, it needs to be ruled on quickly so they can move on and move the case forward. And there's just a backlog of some of those, and if you can come in, manage that docket, and I would probably set them on scheduling orders.
Got it.
And have a couple of status conferences to see where we are on things, and then those guys, absent being something wrong with the scheduling order or some kind of dispute, generally keep their business out of court.
Okay.
And in criminal, absent pleas, everything is done in court. I mean, the defendant must be there; he has to be present.
Yeah. Is it? I know in some criminal cases, it's advantageous for either side to stretch it out for a number of reasons. For witnesses to kind of age out and drop off the face of the earth. Just moving away, and people in emotional cases like family violence and stuff, people go from I want to see the guy in prison to I just don't care anymore and I want to go on with my life. So you see things happening. Does that happen in civil cases where?
It does not happen that I see in divorce cases.
Right.
And, generally in your other kind of civil cases, they would like to get a quick resolution because money is involved.
Right.
In a divorce case or child custody case, children and assets are involved, and that's just pure. A lot of it's pure emotion. In a divorce case. It keeps
the case stays fresh longer than something else. Okay.
But in a criminal case, as a judge, I would have a different viewpoint of the case speed than has a defense lawyer. As a defense lawyer, unless you have a rock solid alibi or an excellent case, delay helps the defense.
Right.
Your case as a district attorney or as an officer does not get better with age.
Right.
The defense cases does.
Yeah.
So absent, a guy being in jail or again a rock solid case, you don't see a lot of speedy trial motions because sometimes be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. I've seen those. I've seen some cases that get stretched out to the point, and your memory fades, and that's more time for just stuff to happen, things to get lost, and like I said, people stop caring. They don't want to be a part of it anymore.
And here, witnesses transfer. It's harder for them the DA's office, and as an investigator, you went through this to get your witnesses here.
Yeah.
And as a defense lawyer, dismissal.
Yep.
Is not a bad result.
That's absolutely right. And honestly, you get those cases where we will do our due diligence, but we're not unhappy to see that dismissal. There are plenty of those because you just, especially you alluded to it, and I've mentioned it before, and I'm going to repeat a lot of things because this may be the only video some of you watch, but with all the influx of people coming in from out of state, and there'll be something happen here, family violence or an assault or whatever. And as soon as the case is done, everyone scatters. So people are going back across the country, and you put in that distance and all the jurisdictional weirdness, it's really tough for me to get them to come back.
Right.
And to be found if they don't want to do it. So, and that was probably 70% of my job was just finding people, because I'll tell you one thing, if you're wondering about dating someone or your kids dating someone, or, is this a good guy or not? If they change their cell phone constantly. They're probably not all that. For whatever reason, that's a very common thread, especially in our, say, our less ethical community, is the cell phone numbers change constantly.
What if they have a burner?
Yeah, or burners, yeah. We had the burner app. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I have not seen that.
It's really cool. It'd be really good for you. I had a burner app, and it was a subscription. That was fantastic for calling people because it didn't say who I was necessarily, and it was completely legal to use, and I could get calls but never give out my actual number.
Right.
So it was pretty handy.
You asked me about the rocket docket. I didn't answer that question. I'm different schools of thought on the rocket docket. As a judge, I think it can be advantageous because you just have back-to-back cases. I think when Rebecca was on, she was in back-to-back trials, and some of those may have been the result of I think they're going through a rocket docket now. But as a practitioner, at times the rocket docket is tough, and they haven't run one in years, but a lot of times when you get inmates and you've dealt with them and they know a rocket docket's coming, they know a better deal is coming to stay off the rocket docket.
Got it.
So there has to be some kind of balance or, a plea offer ahead of time. So if you're going to run the rocket docket, it's not delaying an inevitable plea.
Got it. Well, I noticed when Robinette came in, that was a court I worked in, that a lot of the old cases that I had served 6 or 7 times, they went away. They got done. They got dealt with one way or another.
Right.
And so we talked about kind of the fresh eye thing in terms of local politics and being on the bench, that a lot of that stuff, they're like, I'm just not, and for some reason it was like that when one detective replaces another or sergeant replaces another, and they'll have this case that's been droning on for years and years, and the new guy looks in it and he's not as emotionally, professionally invested in it, and he goes, okay, this is a crap case. We're gonna pitch to the grand jury now and get it over with. So.
And as a practitioner, when Judge Robinette stepped on the bench, that court had been historically the family violence court. And so you had difficult authors coming out of there because of the nature of those crimes. Yeah. And a lot of times, if you think you're going to get a better deal from the judge, you might wait, but then when there's keep your case on the docket. Right. But when there's a change in judges and you don't know what you're getting, you might tell your client, you got a new judge here. Right. And it's his first go around. So you've got to think about this offer now. Yeah. Totally new strategy in there. That reminded me of a question that I wanted to ask, because I need some clarification on this, that you are board certified in criminal law. And can you give me a rundown of what that means and how that happens? Sure. What board certifications is it's like being a specialist. Right. So, if you're a doctor, you might be a specialist in a certain certain medical, you might be a neurosurgeon or a board-certified specialist. It's different than going to your general practitioner. Right. And what's different about it is you have to have a certain number of cases. And at the time I went through, I had to have a certain number of federal cases, a certain number of misdemeanor cases, a certain number of appeals, a certain number of federal cases. They've made an appellate specialization now, but I qualified back when you had to do everything. You then list all your cases and that you've done, and you have to get support. You have to have people write letters for you, and then you submit your application, and then you go take a test. It's like another bar exam. And once you pass that, you're certified, and you can tell people you're an expert. So I'm an expert in criminal law. Across the board, I think only 10% of lawyers have some kind of specialty. And that can be family law, oil and gas law, personal injury trial law, civil trial law, appellate law. There's numerous specialties, and only 90% of lawyers don't have any form of specialty. Okay. And in criminal law, I think only 1% of lawyers are specialists. Wow, I didn't know that. So, I knew I was doing a lot of criminal law and thought I wanted to, become a specialist in it. And I'm the only specialist, running.
That's cool. I'd seen that before, and just advertisements and things of that, and you're the first person I've talked to have ever explained it to me. I appreciate that. And you have a really sharp looking campaign and a lot of experience, and we had a brief conversation, and I want to point all this out. We've known each other for a long time.
Sure.
But other than some professional conversation, a lot of small talk, just, killing time in the office. So said other topics you can talk about. I love this. Bad movies and 80s rock, 80s pro wrestling, and comics.
Yeah,
this is cool.
Actually, when I grew up here, when I was in high school, Southwest Championship Wrestling out of San Antonio came every Thursday. So it was the San Antonio feed, and if you're a wrestling guy, the most famous wrestlers, Shawn Michaels,
right?
Tully Blanchard was out of here. In fact, Joe Blanchard may have run it for a while, his dad. But every Thursday night we would go to the Ector County Coliseum for wrestling.
Right on.
And I never saw a bad wrestling show.
Yeah.
I mean, you got your money's worth.
Somebody did a reality show a few years ago about a school that trained those guys, and it's just, I was really impressed with the athleticism of them and just the public persona and the characters. I was a lifeguard at Water Wonderland in the 80s, and those guys, there was a special on Thursday, I can't remember. Anyway, it was sponsored by a radio station, and they would have guys like that come in. They're coming in to wrestle at the Coliseum, and they would come swing through Water Wonderland. These guys are just enormous, but they were really, really cool people.
They were the Southwest Championship Wrestling guys were a little more old school, so they weren't buffed up.
Yeah.
Now, I also watched the Von Erichs out of Dallas, and those guys, I think Kerry Von Erich was one of the most tremendously muscular guys I had seen, and he was one of the first that was bulked up, muscular.
Well, these guys, I mean, they were all they were bigger than like a collegiate wrestler,
right?
They didn't have they were lean, but they just had the meat and the thick chest and all, not necessarily like the dudes that look like the decoration bodybuilders.
Von Erich was a decoration.
Yeah, those guys. That's a whole. You ought to hear. His name is, he was just on Joe Rogan the other day. He's a Russian master of sports that got into training. He worked with Spetsnaz in the Soviet Union, came over here, and he trained SWAT and Spec Ops people here, and that's how I met him at a conference. And Pavel Satsalin, Pavel is his name. And he met, I'm going to forget it. He was interested in strength and training when he was a kid, and he met somebody like Mr. Olympia or whoever he was, I can't remember, Mr. Universe, one of the famous ones, and he asked to feel the guy's bicep, and he's like, no, I haven't worked out, I haven't done my regimen, I've been traveling for a few days and it's not what it should be. Right. And he said that was the moment he decided he didn't want that kind of strength. He wanted something that he could use all the time, the real thing, and that's what he got into, and it's caused me a number of joint injuries. So I don't know how familiar you are with our podcast, but we have a group. My wife named it. It's on Facebook. We call it the Cinematic Atrocity Aficionado Society. And we're on the quest to find the absolute worst movie ever made. And we think we're getting close. What's your pick right now?
I have a couple. And the worst movie that I saw and I saw it on TV. Obviously, it was made I can't remember if it was in the 40s or 50s or maybe early 60s. Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Oh, writing that down.
Plan 9 from Outer Space was an Edward Wood movie, I think is the director's name. And they would have paper gravestones, and when it would get knocked over. And the best part of the movie was Bela Lugosi was in it towards the end of his life. And he passed away during the middle of it. So the director hired his chiropractor to just come in with the Dracula cape over his face. And I was trying to think.
That's one on our list.
Yeah, Plan 9 from Outer Space. It's categorized universally as one of the worst movies ever made. And I'm trying to think movies that made me mad watching. Surf 2 was one. And I can't remember if there was another surf movie about some old guys that had gone to a beach and hired a young guy to help them. That movie I didn't like. And then I was the second Ghost Rider with Nicolas Cage. Spirit of Vengeance was one of the worst movies I'd seen.
I want to know how that happens. I can equate that to Deuce Bigalow, right? The first Deuce Bigalow was funny.
Right.
It was the writing, the timing. It's campy, it's slapstick, it's goofy. And then the other one was just a train wreck.
Right.
I don't know how you get from one to the other. I don't know how you make that happen. And anyway.
I think Caddyshack 2 is another one that's kind of universally thought of, because the first one was just incredible. Everyone knows the lines.
Yeah.
And I can't think of any line from Caddyshack 2 other than maybe Kenny Loggins did the theme song again.
I don't even remember the theme song for the second one. Wow. Yeah, that has to be bad then.
I think it was, I don't even remember if Rodney Dangerfield, he might have been in it, and it might have been.
See, I got nothing, man. I got a big blank spot there. I'll tell you a modern movie that just, you guys are going to hate me for this, that pissed me off when I saw it, was Interstellar.
I saw that, but I don't remember it.
Yeah. I watched it twice. The first time we saw it, we left because it was so loud. Now, I'm old, but I'm also a firearms instructor and a bassist. I played in a lot of rock bands, a lot of loud bands.
Right.
My wife loves hard stuff, punk, metal. I've replaced speakers that she's blown out in our car. Like you can hear this. So we are no stranger to loud things. And it was so loud we had to leave. The sound was mixed poorly. There's a rumble. They use the rumble technique and everything. You can't understand. If they're in a truck driving, you can't understand them. And it was just a pseudo-intellectual mass of crap. They for instance, they're in a ship. They're about to do a drop on this planet. And they're having a conversation. And they get into, I'm an amateur astronomer, and I can't get into string theory and God particles and neutrinos and all. I don't understand it enough, so it bores me.
Right.
And they have this conversation about all this. And I'm listening to it, and I'm like, yeah, I've heard about that, and I've heard about that. And so this conversation goes 7-8 minutes. They go, all right. So that means for every hour we spend on the surface, that's like 7 years back on Earth, so we need to step it up. I'm like, why didn't you just say that? Just to make everybody seem smart. And then, so I watched it. We left the theater, and I'm like, first of all, did you understand that? Did you really get into it? And my wife said I couldn't get into it. So I came home and I watched it alone. I'm like, no, this is. But it's one of those movies that everybody else just absolutely loves. So, but Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul.
Watched the entire Breaking Bad series, and I've watched all of the Better Call Saul.
All right.
And I was trying to think if you had asked me who I thought was the best TV lawyer, and
that's a good question. Yeah.
Better Call Saul I thought was the best on TV, and I liked the guy Bobby from The Practice.
Oh,
I thought he was a good TV lawyer. Perry Mason won too much.
Yeah.
I liked Henry Winkler when he was on Arrested Development.
Oh yeah. I would put in a vote for Mel in The Sopranos.
Yep, and the Simpsons lawyer.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. That's cool. Yeah,
was he Phil Hartman? Was that?
I think so.
Phil Hartman's voice?
Yeah. I think that character. Yeah, that character went away after that. That's good. Yeah, Better Call Saul. The whole Breaking Bad franchise, I've told you before, that's why the Van Cave exists. It began as a watch party for Breaking Bad, and especially during cold weather, hot weather, when we couldn't we didn't want to sit out in the backyard and smoke cigars or anything. We'd sit in here and watch. And then it just, even after the series ended, we just kept showing up. And later on it becomes a podcast.
Yeah, I like the show. I remember I was watching it, and they played the Marty Robbins song, El Paso. It was one of the last episodes, and then the title of the episodes was Felina.
Yeah.
And then you're going, oh, that's because you're looking at it, and it says Felina, and then it took me a while to realize, oh, it's the Marty Robbins song.
Yeah. It's a fascinating thing to me because that is in the era where things were made to be rewatched. So there was extra attention to detail, and it was a totally different thing. And as far as story goes, my wife is an avid reader, movie person, all that, big Stephen King fan.
Right.
She wouldn't take part with us. She said, I don't like series. I don't like to be left hanging for a week. Can't do it. Won't do it. Okay. So season 2 was about to come out, and AMC was running episodes back to back. And she came out of the bedroom. She'd just taken a shower, and she was wrapped in a couple of her towels, all, spa style. And the first episode was on. And she sat on the arm of the couch. This was on a Saturday. I don't know, 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. And she didn't move for the rest of the day. I brought her 3 meals to that spot, and she watched the entire thing, and she was just as hooked as me. So,
the thing I liked about this first Saul episode was, it was, you can say what you want about how realistic it is, but when he walked in and the police were talking to his client, he was, "You all need to get out of here." I mean, that's a common.
Yeah, I loved that. There was a lot of stuff that he did that it would be plausible. I was watching it where he filed a restraining order to keep the DEA from following Mike, just to buy Mike 24 hours to go do something illegal.
Right.
Try to get away. That was pretty cool. But yeah, so far, I think the worst movie we have found is The Room. If you haven't seen
I haven't seen The Room.
You need to see The Room. Watch The Room and then watch The Disaster Artist back to back. It's a movie about the making of The Room.
I remember The Disaster because that was up for an Oscar, I think, wasn't it? My daughter had a school project, and they have to watch movies from a certain year. And her year was 1946, so it was It's a Wonderful Life and The Killers. And I said, you should do something funny and find the worst movie. And it was I think it was the She-Wolf of London. I mean, or one of those, but she wouldn't do that. And then my nephew, and I'd actually seen this movie, his was 76. So I looked up the worst movies of 76, and the top one was Tidal Wave with Lorne Greene. And it was a Japanese disaster movie about a tidal wave, and they had just inserted Lorne Greene into it.
I forgot about that. I'm putting it on the list. Yeah.
Tidal wave, and I saw it at maybe at the Chief Drive-In. My parents took me to the Chief Drive-In to see Tidal Wave. We
did similarly, it's in the 70s, is a Carpenter film. It was absolutely terrible. Good premise. They need to remake it. Dark Star.
I don't remember if I saw that. Was that the Death Star kind of deal? I mean, I can't remember.
No, it's about a crew of guys on a ship, a spaceship, and they're destroying objects that could eventually hit Earth. So they're blowing up asteroids, and then Armageddon happens on Earth, and they're just stuck. But I'm not even going to tell you what the alien is made out of. I'll tell you the spacesuit's made out of flex vent tubing and cake pans. So just a little teaser there. Yeah. How that's going to go. Yeah. I was really interested. So you do comics? You collect? Or
I did. When I was a kid, I had a decent comic collection. And primarily I read Batman. Mm-hmm. And then when I was in 7th or 8th grade, for some reason I liked Thor. And so I read a lot of Thor. And then, in high school and college, I didn't read them. And then when they did the Batman one where he was older,
right?
I started kind of looking at Batman comic books again. And now that you can download them.
Yeah.
And I read some of the Daredevil because he was a lawyer.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not many lawyers are superheroes, but the Daredevil was.
Where are you on the newer Marvel movies and the new superhero movies?
I have liked most of the, and I'll add this to the list of worst movies, is the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
As far as Marvel movies, I liked pretty much all the Avengers movies. Movies that I was wowed, wow,
Right.
was Thor Ragnarok and the first Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't expect to be that good.
What did you think about Joker?
You know, I had a nerd debate with a friend of mine because he liked the Joker.
Right.
I liked the Joker, but I asked him, how's that guy going to fight Batman? He smokes and doesn't eat.
That's
I mean,
true.
How's he supposed to be a supervillain? But the acting was phenomenal.
It was. Yeah.
But it didn't seem to be part of really the DC universe, or that he was going to become this arch criminal guy that was going to, go head to head with Batman.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. My wife is, among other things, she listens to a lot of podcasts. We were talking about pop culture and
Right.
Podcasters. I mean, we are the lowest form of any kind of broadcast or information sharing. She listens to dozens of them a day. And she was telling me about some of the kind of social political things, and it was supposed to be the big incel anthem. And when you really get into it and watch it, it's not. There are a lot of layers to that movie.
Right.
It was really well done. But since Tim is sick, I consider it safe to talk about this. You mentioned 80s music.
Yes.
What's your zone there?
I'm a hair metal guy. I like Def Leppard. If I had to put a running list together, I mean, I have a hard rock running list, but a lot of Def Leppard, some Bon Jovi, Motley Crue.
Yeah, you're right up the glam alley there.
I mean, deep in it.
Yeah.
Poison.
So I'll tell you, as a musician, that stuff was just kind of there. I wasn't into it. I was in a band that did a lot of that 80s stuff. And even though like Poison was never a band that hooked me, but I can think of few things that are as much fun to play, because you start Talk Dirty to Me and everybody is up. We were having to push people off the stage. It's that's something that we've missed out of music, is just the 80s party theme.
I think the first album I ever bought, and it was back when you bought albums, was I was in 5th grade, Kiss Destroyer.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the first album I ever had. And when they hit with Detroit Rock City, followed by King of the Nighttime World.
Yeah.
I mean, there was when I was like real young, I mean, everyone thought Ace Frehley was the greatest guitarist in the world. And you come to find out later he wasn't playing on all the albums.
Yeah.
But Peter Criss was a phenomenal drummer. Ace Frehley was the greatest rock guitarist.
It's and I was into, we've talked about this at length, Satriani. I mean, I've got Satriani stuff all over the place, and I've met him, and I was into that kind of fusion thing, and it's this clique of musicians that we were already better than everybody else. So the only reason we ever bought that stuff was the girls. So I was into because girls liked it, But I was listening to Living Colour. And, of course, Steve Vai and Satriani and Jane's Addiction later on and that kind of stuff. So, but there's nothing like the energy of that 80s stuff.
Sadly, I don't know Stephen Vai from his own stuff. I know him from David Lee Roth videos.
Oh, yeah. And absolutely nothing wrong with that. He was phenomenal in that was a Skyscraper, wasn't it?
Just Like Paradise.
Yeah. I think the album was Skyscraper.
Yeah, it was Skyscraper.
Yeah. And of course, Crossroads, the movie. That's Steve Vai and Ry Cooder and some others. Yeah, it's amazing. This is a question I love to ask people because there's no right answer. Did you stick in the 80s era? Did you stop really looking for new music or listening to new things sort of when life kicks in?
Let me look at my phone real quick because I run. I have an obsessive compulsive workout. Every day I get up at 4 a.m., a little before.
Oh, wow.
I go lift on Mondays and Tuesdays I lift. Thursdays and Fridays I lift. Wednesdays I spin. Fridays sometimes I spin. Saturdays I spin. And Sundays I go running.
Oh, man.
But I was going to look at I've got a couple of different playlists. Now, my daughter likes my rap playlist. But I've got a playlist called Hard Run. It's AC/DC, Blink-182. I've got some Breaking Benjamin on there.
Yeah.
So they would be new. Def Leppard, Credence, a lot of Foo Fighters, The Disturbed, Rush. I'm an Hagar guy. I'm looking at, and it won't make sense if people are watching the podcast, but I'm looking at your Chicken Foot poster.
Yeah, that's Chicken Foot's the supergroup. Joe Satriani, Sammy Hagar, Michael Anthony, and Chad Smith. So that's, obviously Joe Satriani,
right.
Arguably the greatest rock guitarist on the planet. He's the guy that taught Steve Vai and Kirk Hammett. Chad Smith, Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer, and Michael Anthony from Van Halen, and they're phenomenal. You guys want to see something crazy, especially you, sir, pull up them playing Highway Star live, and I've seen them before. Yeah, it's mind-blowing, and that's something that needed to happen. They've kind of brought that genre
And
in.
as far as new bands, Voltbeat, I like.
Volbeat, yes, sir.
And Stone Sour was on my playlist. But I have a smattering. Voltbeat I might download more than others because I like them. But Foo Fighters and Pearl Jam were kind of, other than the 80s, were kind of the last. I've got a Pearl Jam playlist. Yeah,
I like Pearl Jam. My wife, there's an IT guy at work that's into all kinds of music, and he emails her stuff. And I like Volbeat. She came home with that, bought every album. We've seen them live. We went to Vegas and caught them there. And that's there's so much coolness happening in Scandinavia right now with music. It was like everything that we had in our era, they're going through it now. And so there's some kind of bright rock, more like 80s stuff. The metal is, I can't get into it anymore, but a lot of punk is coming around and some cool stuff like that. It's good to hear.
Yeah, I'll listen to Apple Punk at times.
Yeah.
With the new stuff.
Yeah.
I like Blink-182. They're still probably old punk, so I'm not as familiar with
they're into
Green
that kind
Day.
of ska edge
Green Day
stuff.
I like.
Yeah. Yeah, we're both enormous Green Day fans. Maybe I'll drop some knowledge on you here. Go pick up a copy of the Foxborough Hot Tubs. You heard about that?
I have not.
That is Green Day.
Okay.
They the reason they call it that, there's in Foxborough, where they were all from, they used to go party someplace with a hot tub, and they just said, let's just call it this. But it's their sort of alias band that they'll go play clubs in. And it is not typical Green Day sound, but it's really good.
Yeah.
Not as commercial, but if you've seen Extract, the movie Extract, there's some of the Foxborough hot tubs in there.
Okay.
And I found out about it from a fellow student in an astronomy class. And this girl was telling me about it, and she gave me her CD. And she was vacationing with some friends in California somewhere, and she was in college and doing a semester living with family and hanging out with friends, and walked into a bar and said, Foxborough hot tubs. And they just went in for a beer, and there's Green Day.
Wow, that's cool.
Well, and there's a couple of extra members. They add a guitar, and I think sometimes like a Hammond. But I know you probably have places to be, and we're running a little late. Okay, so your website, I didn't write it down. You want to give us that?
Vote David Rogers.
Vote David Rogers. That will be in, I'll put that in the description. You're also on Facebook.
Facebook.
And what's the name of the Facebook page? I forgot.
I have to look. I think it's David Rogers for the 142nd.
Yeah, I do know if you just put your name in, David Rogers, Midland, Texas, both will come up. Do you have any events or anything coming up?
A couple of the Rotary Club, I think, is coming up. I'm not sure when that is. And really, I look at my calendar about the day before.
Yeah. That's
only other thing I add is, I've got to thank my fiance, Michelle Green.
I was going to mention
lawyer.
that. Yeah. And you guys are, it's not on this one. I wrote it down because I was going to impress you with my research. You're engaged and getting married in May.
Right.
Cool. That's a good year. I've been married coming up on 19 years, and we were married in May.
So she is helping me tremendously with my campaign. And I dropped that I was running in the middle of her planning for the wedding.
Oh.
So, yeah, that's gone over well.
Yeah.
But she's been a trooper. She's been fantastic. She's awesome.
Those are right. Like I said, we married in May. We were married less than 2 years, and I got deployment orders.
Wow.
So yeah, she was here looking after a raging 12-year-old boy, and all while I was riding boats. Well, this has been a great time. It's been fun to get to know you a little bit better, and we encourage everybody, give us a like, subscribe to us. Normally the podcast is way more trashy than this. We're talking about Bigfoot. We do Skeptics Roundtable, where we shoot down internet rumors and deal with stuff like that. It's kind of funny. But and Facebook, share us. It's very hard to find our YouTube videos on Facebook. So I'm going to release a video. I'll probably record it tonight or tomorrow and upload it to Facebook and kind of point people in this direction. So,
all right. Well, thank you for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. It's great. We tried to stay out of politics, but all of the candidates, so many of the candidates are people like you that I know that's just cool to sit down with. And I'm not public about who I'm voting for. Anybody can run by and jam aside my yard, sign in my yard, and sit on the podcast, because like all of you know, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. It's one of those things. But that's all we got. And thanks for watching. And again, like, subscribe, share, pass this around. Best of luck to you. And I hope
all right.
I hope it goes well.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your engagement.
Thank you.
And I'm going to put these movies down. We need to put you in our club, I think. Cheers, folks. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.